All right. Okay, we should be live now, and we've just ticked over to 10 o'clock, so people will start joining shortly. There we go, I can see some people coming in. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to hold off for about a minute or two just to allow a couple of stragglers to come in. This time of year, I feel like everyone's either extremely busy or a little bit burnt out. So I imagine we might have a couple of stragglers and at no fault of their own. So we'll just give that a little bit and then we'll dive right in. There we go. I can see a couple more joining now. Yeah, perfect. All right. I think we're pretty much good to start. Just as a reminder, this will be sent out as a recording. You could also go request the recording as well if you want to, I don't know, get somebody to jump on our website and download it because you found it of value. But yeah, I think we'll jump in now. We're 10:01. Everyone's time is precious. So, all right. Good morning, everyone. My name's Carl Jablonski, and I am the Head of Business Development over at WildTech. Really appreciate you jumping on this morning for our webinar. We've got a really exciting one today, at least in my eyes. We're talking all about ROI or value. It's really, the way I see it is it's trying to work out the tangible benefits of implementing business management software, specifically something like ERP. So welcome to the webinar, Navigating ROI Analysis, a roadmap for success. As always, please hold, any questions. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. You can write them out as you want. I'll just address them at the end. That way you don't have to sit there and, forget what you were going to ask. We can just roll with it. All right. So for those of you, I can see there's a few people from customers and a couple of businesses that we're looking to work with in the call. But for those of you that have never engaged with WildTech before, I'm going to do a little bit of a quick about us. I'm not going to beat the drum too hard, but basically WildTech are an Australian-owned and operated business software transformation partner. We see ourselves as digital transformation experts, and really what that means is we have quite a breadth and width to our capability, but a lot of our methodology stems from a single source of truth, cloud-based ERP, sort of as the foundational level of a business's IT roadmap and IT ecosystem. As you can see here, we've got a couple of industries highlighted. That's obviously not what we're limited to. It's just sort of where most of our skin in the game, if you will, comes from. We've got a large number of customers in each of those sort of verticals. What we really focus on is with our clients is process optimization, consolidation of disparate systems, and building out, sort of an end-to-end business application. Now, I know some of you are probably sitting there saying, but hang on, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. There's no such thing as one platform that's going to do everything my business wants. You're absolutely right. When we say end-to-end, we mean, to the best of the ability or the best of the possibility that we can sort of achieve. There's always going to be a few things that sit outside of your ERP, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Integration is key. You can also see a couple of the products that we work with. We're vendor agnostic, so we are maximum certified partners with most of the big players, and we partner with them because they are, in our opinion, and in a lot of other people's opinions, sort of the best at that end-to-end unified business management software. So today's agenda, all right, so today it's all about ROI. It's about calculating ROI. It's about discussing ROI to the team, and it's about achieving ROI. So we're going to talk about the key impact areas for consideration. We're then going to go into WildTech's recommended methodology, which is tried and tested, and we really, really do stand by it. We'll talk about a couple of the sort of examples of best practice ROI assessments, and then we'll go into a couple of things that you really want to keep in mind when you're looking at an ERP project or a business management software project. As I said, ERP is at the heart of what we do here, but it's not always ERP. It could just be a CRM project, which is in itself as big as you'd like it to be, and also very impactful. Finally, we'll round off on a couple of expensive but very common challenges to avoid. Trust me, we see these challenges all the time, and we're just going to talk around that a little bit and inform you sort of the counter view to those challenges. So when you're looking at a project, or when you're looking at working out the ROI of a potential project, or the value or the outcomes of a potential project, you got to make sure you ask the right questions. So first and foremost, what are the outcomes that you are trying to achieve? I know it sounds silly, but you really do want to define with your team, or with your, within your own sort of understanding, what are you trying to achieve? It gets a little bit muddy sometimes because you go out to market and there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of platforms saying we're the best, we can do this, we can do that, pick me. And there's a lot of bells and whistles that are not necessarily relevant or particularly helpful to you. So just identifying, what the 2, 3, maybe even 4 objectives, key objectives are that you're trying to address is critical, because when you start going into the breadth of the capabilities of software and you start unraveling your own ecosystem, it can get very confusing and very messy. So just having that sort of true north, so to speak, is pivotal from day one through to post go live, when you're on the system and you're flying and you're enjoying a lot of ROI. You really want to ask yourself as well, what does the project look like from a tangible perspective? Because a lot of people will call us and say, hey, we've got a lot of pain, we've got a lot of bottlenecks, we've got a lot of manual processes, my team are sick and tired of having to spend 2 to 3 days on the billing side of things every month, or every time I ask for a report, it takes someone in my team a full day of work to generate it for me, or our inventory isn't syncing properly with our e-commerce sites and our physical stores, and customers are ordering products that we're actually out of, and then that's a negative customer experience. These are all clearly impactful situations, or these are all clearly like significant impacts that you want to address, right? And they're all negative impacts. But what is the dollar value of those impacts? And what is the dollar value of you correcting those problems or challenges? So it's all about, once again, making the intangible tangible. And that's what this is all about today. So at WildTech, we're really big on digital transformation, and we're really big on looking at everything holistically. Even if your project objectives that we just spoke about are relatively narrow and they are very specific and focused to a department or an area, you have to look at everything holistically. Your entire IT roadmap or mud map or ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, needs to be constantly looked at whenever you're looking to make improvements or changes, right? The reason being is it's actually all linked, and movement in one area can affect what you can or can't do in another area. A great example of this is always, oh, we want to put in a new financial system, but it's okay, it's just financials, and that's only going to impact our accounting team. Well, a year down the line, when you're looking at a new CRM or a new WMS or inventory tool, what you can find is the accounting package that you selected that was only for accounting actually now sort of pigeonholes you into one of 2 or one of 3 options on the WMS or e-commerce side or whatever it might be, because platforms tend to play together in terms of like partnerships. So, the Apple universe, as always. Apple connects really well with all the Apple stuff. Well, vendors out there have created similar sort of scenarios where they have got 4 or 5 or 1 or 2, however many, inventory partners. And then now, because you're on that financial tool, that's kind of where you're stuck looking. So it's just always about keeping, your eye on the whole piece of the whole pie, and making sure that whatever you're doing is going to make sense in the long run. Additionally, you've got to consider the impacts across your whole organization and the impacts across, your whole software ecosystem. I really love this slide, and we use this in a number of our webinars because it is so near and dear to our methodology and our hearts. The reality is making changes is always going to have sort of knock-on effects, and you want to make sure that you consider those knock-on effects when you're trying to work out things like return on investment or value. Um, for example, customers. It might be a case where because of some changes that you're looking to make or because of the objectives you've got, your goal is to increase your customers, increase your customer retainment, increase your customer experience. It might be just to, have more profitable engagements with your customers. So it's on the efficiency side. With employees, it might be about trying to save effort for them, try to save a bit of their time, because you could have a team that are fatigued and just honestly over having to use Excel spreadsheets for everything. And then 20 minutes into working on an Excel spreadsheet, realizing that they're working on the wrong version. It's about the impact of making their life better. It's about the impact of once you save them time, what can they be doing? Well, they can be doing higher value tasks or higher order activities. I had a group financial controller the other day that I was working with, and I said the other day was a couple of months ago, who said to me simply, I don't have the visibility in the data and the reports to be a group financial controller. At the moment, I'm just like a senior accountant because I have to generate the reports. I have to check everything 3 or 4 times because our system just doesn't allow, me the luxury of being able to say, I trust this report, right? So suddenly you've got this person who should be doing a lot, sort of more valuable tasks, having to do a lot more menial tasks. So consider how it impacts your employees. On the partner side, obviously a lot of partners want to work with partners that sort of have their house in order, right? So by having your systems, your data, and your team all more accurate, efficient, and in a better state, you can probably have more opportunities and better engagements and, significantly more savings when working with partners. And then finally, technology, of course. I was working with a customer not too long ago who said, oh, our licensing is really cheap. For what we're currently using, and that's like a real plus. And after going through a scoping process with them, we actually worked out that they had 1.5 FTEs whose entire job was to make sure that that system didn't fall over. So when you took the licensing and then you added in that sort of unknown IT 1.5 headcounts, the person said, I actually cannot believe that it was costing this organization that much money. I thought that that person was doing other tasks in the IT team. Now, it wasn't 1.5 specific, people. It was obviously spread across the team. But once they worked out the effort there, it was quite shocking. So once again, consider your entire ecosystem and consider the impact of whatever you're about to do across your entire ecosystem as well. We've spoken a little bit about, or we've spoken a lot about the holistic view, right? I cannot stress this enough. I've had so many businesses, complain that, oh, we'd love to go with X, Y, Z, or we'd love to do A, B, C, but we can't. And I say, well, hang on, why can't you? And they say, well, we can't because we're currently stuck on, system A, and system A does not have very good integration capabilities. And because of that, we now have to, sort of stall what we're doing and, work with system A or vendor A, and it's a real pain. So you want to make sure that your entire IT mud map is working towards the same goals and objectives, and that you are, obviously things change, markets change, especially fast growing businesses, everything changes rapidly. That's the whole, fun of it. But you want to make sure that you've got like a rough idea, a rough mud map of what your IT system, your IT ecosystem needs to be doing over the next 2 to 3 years to support your business mud map, right? You've got to make sure that they walk in sort of a lockstep. Now, this is probably one of the slides that most people tuned in for today, right? The goal of understanding how everything works together and highlighting your objectives and, understanding what areas are going to be impacted positively and negatively is to really build out a detailed impact analysis. And the idea here is that you are calculating the cost of, the manual effort, the manual processes, the inaccuracies, all the negative impacts, and then you are essentially working out what the potential improvement will be. I understand that a lot of people don't have this part here. I know we've got a number of CFOs on the call right now, so you probably have a pretty good idea of what the cost to your business is, to have these inefficiencies and have these problems. But you might be sitting there and saying, Carl, how am I supposed to know what the potential improvement's going to be? I've never done one of these projects before, or the last time I did one of these projects, it was 10 years ago. This is where your partner comes in. This is where WildTech, if we were your partner, would step in, right? We use a number of metrics and benchmarks across the various vendors, customer case studies or customer success stories, as well as industry benchmarks to work out, where your dial can be moved to. So we will work with you in a collaborative way in an ROI evaluation study to work out what the potential improvement could be. And we will always be very cautious with this, right? We're very big on under promising and over delivering. The last thing we'd want to do is inflate this number here and have us fall short at the end of it, right? That's just, we don't see that as a very good way to generate a good customer and experience, right? And obviously customer experience and customer retention are huge for us. Those are two very key objectives for WildTech. So we'll always be very reserved on these potential improvements, and we'll obviously take that back to whatever your numbers are, whether that's the average cost of your FTEs in finance, in the warehouse, etc. And we will work with you to work out what the potential impact is. Now, the interesting thing about working out what the potential impact is obviously it's got to be industry specific. It's got to be sort of life stage specific. And that's kind of where our expertise and our vendors that we work with expertise in terms of their customer bases and the results that they've gotten really comes into play, because we've got to make it as specific to your business as possible. There's always going to be a little bit of wiggle room because no one is your business, nobody is you, but that's once again why we are very conservative with this number. You might see at the bottom left here an interesting sort of number there. It's monthly cost of delay. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple of later slides. But the idea here is that if the potential annual impact is, for this example, $576,200, that every month you don't start your project and you don't work towards realizing this value and realizing these benefits, or this ROI, you're actually sort of delaying that realization, which has a cost to it. So we'll dive deeper into that in a second. But work with your partner on this. And if your partner can't provide you with this or doesn't offer this, maybe try to find someone who will, or push them for it, because it is so critical. You've got all your business knowledge in your head. You've got all the numbers, that you can readily use, but what you don't have is the understanding of where you could go. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what it's going to look like once you're on your new business management software. A lot of this involves working it out across a 5-year summary, right? Because it's not just a 1-year project. You're not going to be using this software tool for 1 year. It's very unlikely that that is ever the case. So you have to work it out across 5, 6, 7, 10 years, whatever you're comfortable with. And the idea here as well is you're going to have some investment. It's going to be fairly investment heavy up front because you want to spend the time and the money and the effort to get your team completely trained up on the new system. You want to spend the time to configure the system to make it fit for your business and deliver on those key objectives that we spoke about. So you're going to have a little bit of investment sort of stacked forward or upfront in the professional services space. Now, this has obviously not been filled out just yet, but what you can see here is then you're going to have your ongoing software licensing. Now, we work with some platforms, and there are plenty of platforms out there that price things very differently. This is very important to work out, your total cost of ownership, and then therefore like your likely ROI in the long run, because some businesses will have, or some vendors or software packages out there will have very low licensing costs, and that looks very attractive. But there's software, the investment level, sorry, to configure the software and maintain the software is significantly more. So you'd have a much higher upfront cost in that year one for things like training and configuration. So just putting it out across 5, 6, 7, 10 years, whatever you want it to be, is really important, because what you'll see is more often than not, they sort of level out. And then in some cases, the one that you expected to be cheaper, due to support, might actually not be by about year 3, year 4, or year 5. This is an example of what a gold standard ROI calculation could look like. As you can see here, it's across the 5 years like we discussed. It dives into each specific business process or each specific business department. And it takes into consideration the software costs, the professional services cost, and that normally in the professional services here, you would have some support. Some platforms, as I said, are more support intensive, some are less. Now, once you work all of this out, you can have a really interesting view into what your cash flow is going to look like. And interestingly enough, obviously, your return on investment. What is critical, and I see other people in the market avoid this, but what is critical is work with your partner and make sure that you have got a staggered realization of value. Because in year one, you're not going to be getting 100% of your ROI, because you're going to be spending 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 months of that actually implementing and bedding down the solution. So that's why you can see here in year one, it's actually got a negative return, because in this particular case, the project, and that time to realizing value sort of ate into too much of that first year. But by year two, you can start seeing that there's a return on investment, and then year 3, year 4, and year 5, that's when you start to get a significant return back. Another important thing to note is it is truly Wildtech's belief that you should never stop optimizing your solutions. Just like your business mud map continuously evolves, so should your IT mud map. So things could change significantly, for year 3, year 4, and year 5, when you truly bedded down and realizing the value of your initial phased project, and you're now bringing on a phase 2 or a phase 3. But this is what we want to be working towards. So I often get people ask me, so when should I do an ROI assessment? Should I do this at the beginning, at the end? Like, where does this fit in the process? And it's an interesting one, because there's, to a degree, there's like a pain ROI assessment that you need to do, or there's like a pain assessment you need to do before you even decide to do a project like this. Because nobody wants to do, a business management software transformation project unless you're really feeling, you know, the pain or bottlenecks or issues with efficiency. And you need to do a little bit of a bit of a check there to work out, like, hang on, okay, do we actually have enough problems, and does this justify us looking into a project like this? So I kind of refer to that as like a pain check or a pain assessment. And that sort of typically would happen before you engage anyone, or before you go out into the market and start doing research. Now, the one thing I want you to take away from this is always do your ROI assessment before signing off on your statement of works, because your statement of works is essentially your project document with everything that you're going to do, all the costs, everything rolled up, all the assumptions, all the gaps, all of that stuff. And what you want to do is you want to really understand what your objectives are and what the potential financial impact is going to be before embarking on the project, because it just gives you clarity. We put this in usually around the right before the statement of work sort of session. Obviously, we're agile. We work with any sort of parameters or any sort of process that our customers want, but usually they want to go with our tried and tested methodology. But we normally slot it in here for a key reason. We spend some time with you doing scoping and information gathering, so we're understanding your business. We're understanding your critical business objectives and challenges. Remember those 3 or 4 things that you really want to address, and we're understanding the bottlenecks, the gaps, etc. We work towards a customized demo where we can actually show you in the system how we're addressing those pain points, how we're addressing those issues. So you spend some time letting us know exactly what's going on. We understand your business. It's a bit of a knowledge transfer. Then we show you in the system so you can see firsthand the impact that you're going to get. Then we translate that impact into dollars. At that point, you get the comfort of reviewing a statement of work that from day one to day go live, you know exactly how we're going to deliver the project and how we're going to get you to that ROI. And then it's statement of work sign off, and then the fun really begins. You actually get to do the implementation. But that's a topic for another webinar another day. So as you can see here, we're firm believers that it should be right about in the middle of your process before you commit to anything or before you even start drafting any sort of contracts or statement of work. We talked about a couple of key things to keep in mind when looking at ROI, when looking at projects. The first one of the two really is the fact that accountability matters. We beat this drum time and time again. We're really big on it. The who is just as important as the how, right? It's great that you've identified 2, 3, 4, 5 key objectives, and it's great that you understand how that's going to impact your business holistically and obviously tangibly. But now we need to work out, okay, how are we actually going to realize that return on investment? And this is sort of what we address in the statement of work typically. And it's making sure that all key stakeholders have had a chance to give their input and they're all in lockstep and singing from the same hymn sheet in terms of who is accountable for what. All right. So we're talking project delivery team. We're talking process owners, external delivery partners, because sometimes, it's not just one partner that you're working with. So you might have a partner like WildTech managing the other delivery partners, or you might be working with them individually. It's entirely up to you. And obviously understanding, what finance is responsible for. So it's just really taking the time to work out who is tackling what part of the project and making sure that everybody is in alignment with that. Another one is that transparency is key, right? Where when doing these projects and you go through, you do the scoping, you do the demo, you do the ROI calculation, and then you start with the statement of work building and the planning and drafting out exactly how your project's going to go. It's really important to understand who's got what underlying assumptions, because there will always be some assumptions made, right? There's always things, no matter how well you scope with your partner and how thorough they are and how much time they spend with you, there'll always be a few things that pop up, all right? And it's just important to understand that, okay, hey, there's a bit of a gap here. We don't really know how this works just yet, but we're going to address it with either A, B, or C, right? So it's just understanding that, from a project fit perspective and a scope perspective, that there are probably going to be some assumptions made, and we need to make sure that we're both on the same page there. Additionally, relates to the return on investment calculations, which is, we're making a few assumptions here that your business is going to continue to grow, that the market is going to continue to look good, and that, the various other sort of knock-on chain effects in your mud map are going to occur. So it's just being very clear and transparent on okay, well, we've done our best we can to make sure that this project makes sense from a business perspective. We've done the best we can to make sure this project makes sense from a financial perspective, but things do change. And at WildTech, we're always really big on being transparent. So now just quickly, we're going to run through a couple of the challenges, and then we'll probably open up for some questions. I hear this all the time, whether it's a CFO who's, discussing this project with the board, or it's a COO and a CFO sort of disagreeing on something, right? Sometimes we go through the process and it makes sense. It makes business sense, it makes financial sense. And then suddenly there's a delay. And look, delays happen and delays are necessary. Obviously, if you had critical personnel changes or you had some sort of, super critical issue occur or change in the market that you need to address, by all means, you've got to have clear priorities. But sometimes we just, we see these delays come up for quite interesting reasons or low priority reasons. Sometimes it's just hesitation to jump into the project. And we hear things like, oh, we're 12 months away from the project, or we're 6 months away from the project because we want to go live 1st of July. We hear that a lot. And sort of the counter comments to that is, okay, right, so we want to delay for 4, 5, 6 months, 12 months, however long. But have we worked out what that delay costs? And this comes back to what I was talking about, the monthly cost of delay, right? And this comes back to how I mentioned that the realization of value is usually over 1 to 3 years, 2.5 years. And it's a bit of a scale. You've got to bed the system down, get comfortable with it, and start optimizing and really reaping the rewards of your new system. More often than not, the person will say, no, we haven't calculated that. And when you do calculate that, you get some really interesting results. Things like, it costs us $100,000 a month at the moment to not address this problem. And then suddenly that can challenge the list of priorities and that can take this project back towards the top. Another one is, oh, we're too busy. We're growing like crazy at the moment. Well, interestingly enough, as I'm sure you're probably, aware, the ROI calculation that we looked at earlier, it actually factors in your current operations and your current inefficiencies, your current bottlenecks. As you grow, if you're throwing more people at the problems, like more FTEs or PTEs, and what you're saying is like, okay, well, shoot, we grew 30% this year. Well, we're going to need an extra person on billing and invoicing. You can see the problem, right? You're just making the actual issues and the opportunity cost compound. You're throwing more money sort of, I wouldn't say down the drain, but in an inefficient spot, which further sort of, boosts the priority level of addressing the issue with, unified business management software. I talked about this priorities, priorities, priorities. This is sort of just a summary of, look, at the end of the day, when you go through this process and you work out the return on investment and you see just how much it can impact your business, suddenly you can sit there and say, well, hang on, do these other priorities save us $1 million over 5 years? Or do these other priorities help us with staff retention because it makes their life better? Once you work out the impact of addressing those key objectives or those key challenges in a financial sense, you would be amazed how often I've had people say, oh man, I wish we did this earlier. Or I had no idea that we could improve things that much because I had no idea how bad things really were. So what you want to do is you want to just summarize it all and sit there and say, okay, well, here's our priorities. New business management systems are sitting at number 3, number 4, number 5. But oh wait, if we do this, it'll actually save us $1 million, $2 million. The numbers can get really scary when you work it out, even conservatively. So a lot of this webinar today, we talked about, you don't know what you don't know. And what you really want to do is you want to get trusted advice, whether that's a friend of a friend, a person in the ecosystem, whether that's bringing somebody internally, I don't know. But time and time again, we found that working with the right partners is absolutely critical. And it's a partner that is going to work with you on your objectives, spend the time with you to understand, your current state of play and where you want to go, and the gaps between those two phases, and turn that into a tangible impact figure, right? And above all else, be transparent in the numbers that they're working with. Now at WildTech, this is part of our standard engagement. We really do want to spend the time with you to work out what the ROI is going to be, because to be honest with you, it makes the whole project just better. The statistics behind, working towards a tangible ROI when you're doing a project like this, increasing, the likelihood of a successful project are just immense. It's absolutely just jaw dropping. So find trusted advice. All right. I know we're running a little bit over. I hope you don't mind. We'll just open up for some questions now. If you do need to drop off, that's totally fine. And you want to shoot the questions through via email or give us a buzz, that's totally fine as well. But for those of you that want to stay on a little bit longer, please shoot through some questions. I know we had a few while we were running, so we'll just start with those. All right. Okay. How long does an ROI assessment typically take? Is it measured in days or weeks or months? Look, it depends. Typically, I'd say it's closer to weeks, not months or days. If you're doing it in days, it can be a little bit rushed. But look, you might have the data on hand, and you might have a very scoped idea and clear idea of your processes and where you want to get to. So you could maybe get one out in a couple of days. But generally speaking, I'd say it takes a couple of weeks. We sort of do it as part of our process, which also includes things like on-site workshopping, scoping, things like that, gap analysis, SOW building, demos. So as part of like our general engagement, it's probably about 4 or 5 weeks. We don't really want to rush it because at the end of the day, it's normally the basis for you kicking the project off. And it's always fun to look back on an accurate ROI study and a happy customer or a customer case study, because that's when we can really look and say, okay, well, how close were we? So yeah, I'd say it's a number of weeks, and you definitely want to include it in your process, because at the end of the day, when you're trying to convince a board, it's all about dollars, right? All right. Thanks, Carl. We're in retail, and our preference is to retain our e-commerce platform, Shopify. In your experience, can we still expect to achieve a holistic approach like you mentioned? Yes, absolutely. So at WildTech, we go on and on about a holistic approach, but we don't always mean rip and replace everything in your ecosystem, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. A lot of people come to us, and funnily enough, we work with a lot of retail customers, and e-commerce is one of those super personal choices that you love, right? And you either love your e-commerce platform or you hate it. And if you love it, you don't want to replace it. There's always going to be systems in your ecosystem that work really well. Perhaps they're industry specific, perhaps they're, your baby, and they're critical to your success and part of your IP and what makes you you, right? Um, we don't have to replace everything. We just have to account for everything. So, for example, Shopify, we're working with a lot of apparel and sort of fashion and accessories businesses at the moment. This is a big one for them. They love Shopify, but they can't get it to sync with their financials and their inventory properly. So we've actually, got quite a tried and tested solution for exactly that problem, and it involves keeping Shopify, because Shopify is a highly rated e-commerce platform. So short answer, not a problem at all. Just, when you're working with us or your partner, just identify the areas that you do not want to change, and work around that. All right. Any recommended pre-work could we look to do over the quiet? Okay, yeah. Any recommended pre-work over the quiet period if we wanted to look at a project like this early next year? Um, yeah, look, absolutely. It's always good for you to sit down and talk to your team and get a good understanding of where they're spending their time, because it might surprise you. It's also always interesting to gather that sort of data and those metrics. A lot of it comes from like your GL, right? Like your average FTE in each department, and then sort of equating that to, well, how much, like, there's an hour of a warehouse person's or a finance person's time, cost. You can do a lot of exercises like that, but once again, it comes back to the trusted advice. Even if it's a relatively quiet period for you, and it's not, you're in that early information gathering stage, reach out to a partner or to someone and work with them, because at the end of the day, this is the first time or second time or third time maybe that you're doing a project like this and an ROI calculation like this. Partners in our space, like WildTech, I mean, we've done probably hundreds. That's not an exaggeration. Maybe, yeah, we've done a lot. So work with your partners, because at the end of the day, they'll probably be able to make it a more efficient and more effective process. All right, I feel like I've been going on and on. I love this topic, and also, to be completely transparent with you, we're getting towards Christmas, so an excuse to sit here and talk ROI and sit on a webinar. I wanted to maximize it, but I know that we've had a few people drop off because we're over time. But any final questions? Because I feel like we're definitely going to wrap up very soon. Once again, if the questions come to you after the webinar, just shoot it out to us, right? We're a very friendly team here, and we love talking to people no matter what stage they're at in terms of their research or their interest. We'd love to have that conversation. All right, I think that's it. I don't think we've got any more questions coming through. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you sticking with me. Normally they're lunchbox sessions. This was a bit more of a brunch or a coffee session. We definitely went over time, so appreciate you for staying on till the end. But have a great holidays, and yeah, we'll likely do another one of these in the new year. So see you then. Thank you.